Hi guys, welcome to another video of our API automation series. In this video, I'm going to discuss with you one of the very important topic in software industry. This is not just for if you are working for API automation. It is going to be useful for any of the development project. It can be useful for the Java developers, it can be used for the test developers. It doesn't matter also if you are working with Java TestNG and Selenium project for web-based UI, or you are working with Cucumber-based, BDD-based API automation, right? And whatever automation you are using, this is one of the common file, common you can say subject, common matter, which is being used in almost every development project, right? So here the topic you can see that we are going to discuss in today's video is nothing but properties file and YAML file. Okay. So now question comes, what is properties file and what is YAML file, right? Similarly, that next question, what it does arise, that we should have to know that what is the or what are the use cases, right? Why to use properties file or why to use YAML file, right? Where we can use it, what are the benefits of using properties or YAML file, right? And how, and after that we have to know that how to use this property and or you how to use the YAML file, right? So these are the things that we are going to discuss in today's video. Also we'll be discussing that where to use and where not to use, right? Definitely each and everything has their its advantages, and some cases they have some their disadvantages also. So we have to keep on mind that where it is very useful and where it is not useful, right? So according to our use cases, according to our requirement, we have to decide, okay, this is my project, this is my work I have to do. So for this reason, for this project or for this work, what I have to pick, right? Either you have to go with the properties file or you have to go with the YAML. That is depends on your requirement, depends on your project. Okay. And I'm discussing on this thing. Let's jump into the properties file. So what is properties file? Properties file, if I talk about what is properties file is nothing but a plain or straight file where it is just going to have only key and value pairs, right? So the main thing in the properties file is it is just having key and value pairs. There will be having key and values. Okay, it's a flat file similar to your text file, right? File is nothing but a file which is having an extension with the properties. Okay, and in the content of the file will be in the key and value pairs. Okay, so you'll be having, let's say I have a URL of a application, right? So in the URL you will see http is colon double slash google.com, right? So if you have this kind of key and value pairs, if you have this kind of data to store into a file, so in that case, if in that case it is very easy to use the properties file. Later on you can store your username and password, right? So username equals, let's say, admin, and you can store password is equal to admin, right? So this kind of key and value pairs, which is very straightforward to use. You can see that I have a key and this is the value of this particular key, right? So if you have this kind of data, if you want to store this kind of data, that is very useful to go ahead with the properties file in Java, right? And what are the if I say this properties file is going to have with the key and value with the comma with the equal separator, or also you can use with the separator value also. If you use this way, that is also fine. So either you use password is equals admin, or you have to use password one, let's say password colon admin. Okay, so any of the use cases is fine if you are using properties file. Okay, so the left side is you're going to be your key and right side is going to be your value. Now if I talk about how to use that, we will see in just now in couple of minutes. Within a couple of minutes, we are going to see how to use this properties file, and we will see what are the disadvantage also. Now let's quickly talk about YAML file. What is YAML file? YAML file is nothing but another you can see file which is contents which is dealing with the data of your project. Okay, so let's say you have a data, right? So I have data, so that data I want to store into some particular file, right? So that file, it is my choice whether you want to go to the properties file or you want to go to the YAML file. So the basically, what is the difference between properties file and YAML file then, right? So the YAML file is nothing but it is a structure based file where you can store your key and values, and there is the structure you have to maintain. Main thing is you can have nested data also. Let's say I have a key, let's say uh, uh, um, I have a key, let's say a user, right? So user is having a value, let's say user, it can have, let's say I am saying user have, user is having a value, and I'll say user can have its name and something, right? So it can have name, it can have age, right? So this kind of data. So user, and there is another parameter, let's say company. So company can be one value, let's say company IBM, right? So the company name is one, that is a single parameter value, but it has another property which is called as user. This user is can have nested data also. So if you have this kind of data, then it is recommended that you can go ahead with this YAML file. Okay, so you can understand now, if you have a flat data, so only key and values, there is no nested, right? So no nested implementation. In that case, it is good to go ahead with the properties file. If you have nested data to store, to store, if you have nested data to keep in your project for use cases, so in that case, uh, it is, you can say, good to use the YAML file. Now let's go and see how to use this, how to define this, right? So what I'll do here, let me add some configurable details that we every project needs, right? So what I'll do, I'll just create a file, sorry, folder directory over here, and I'll say directory, and I'm giving name as config. So this is the directory where I'm going to store all my config directories. Let's say I'm going to have a file, and I'll say name config.properties, right? Config.properties. Okay, so remember guys, you have to give a extension of, if you are using property file, then the extension of the file should be properties, right? Now here it's your choice how you are on the all the key and value pairs that you have in your project that you can design here. So let's say I'm saying URL is equals, I can see http is colon slash slash www.google.com, right? Google.com. So this is how you can store your data. Next, you can say, let's say, um, I'm saying country is equal to India, right? So in this way, you can store your data into this particular uh, config file, right? If you have this kind of very flat data, very simplest data you have, so those kind of information you can store into here. So in your automation project, you can store your URL, you can store your, let's say, browser, right? So browser value, which browser you want to execute your test case. So let's say you can say that Chrome. So this kind of data you can store over here. You can take some other things, let's say headless mode, if you want to execute the test in headless mode or no, right? So you can have data stored here over here. Remember one thing, this property file always take the data in string format. Whatever you are writing here, that doesn't matter. When you are getting the data into your project, into your JavaScript, from your calling from the code, it will be going to provide in that particular in string format only. So this is something a property file look like. So here you will be having key and value pairs. You can have with colon separated also, that is not an issue. Let's say I'm saying company colon IBM, right? So in this way also you can use it, but remember to use any of the particular format. Either you use equals or you can use colon, not mixing of both. That make a you can say confusion, right? So I for now I'll be removing this one. I'll be using the equal sign. So the left side is my key and right side is my value, right? Similar way, as I created this particular properties file, I can have YAML file also here. Let me create another file which I'll be taking with a YAML config dot. I'll be taking extension as a YAML, YAML. Okay. So you can see now I have a YAML file. So you can see that extension is showing here. If it is not showing to you properly in your IntelliJ IDE, then you can go ahead and you can add a theme. You can see go to project structure and go to, sorry, not project structure, go to the settings and there you can see plugins, and in then plugin you can see search for YAML. Okay, so just enable this particular YAML if it is not already installed in your IntelliJ tool, so you can install. And if you are using Eclipse or some other tool, just check how to add that from your marketplace. Okay, so now let me go to this YAML file. Here YAML file, what you can do actually, let's say I have a uh, I have a details to have here in this particular YAML configuration file. Let's say I'm talking about APIs, right? API testing. So here let's say I have a API, and for this API, this is a route you can see for my entry, and this API I want to have the, let's say, base URL, right? So I can store base URL, and I can give a value of this base URL within a double quote. And let's say I'm giving the value of this base URL, let's say https colon double slash request request req res request.com. Okay, so this is one of the my base URL that I have given here over here. And similarly, you can have multiple key and value pairs. Let's say I'm saying uh, uh, endpoint URL, right? Endpoints, and this endpoint can have multiple set of data. So I can have endpoint, let's say, for get single user. Okay, get simple user, and for this, let's say I have a endpoint URL like anything it can be. It can be like let me open do one thing. Let me open a postman tool. I'll get that data from there. So I'm opening my postman. So here you can see I have a single user, that is a one of the API I have. So endpoint URL is going to be API slash user 2. So let's say I'm taking this. For now, I'll be using all in single small character. So let's just see. Another, let's say I want to take another get list of users, right? So this is something list users. So here list users. This is another API I do have. So I'm going to store the data for this one also. Now, and one more thing is, let's say I want to info and to, yeah, that's all. Might be. So here you can see I have two kind of data. That is a API here. It is a root data. Root you can say key, and this is the key, and this is a value. But this is something which is again holding a key and value pairs, right? So this kind of information. Let's say I want to store another information that is nothing but headers, right? What are the headers you want to pass, right? So header information, let's say I'm here going to take this content type, right? So this content type I can take here. So header can have multiple value. So I'll say content type. So what is the value is of content type is going to be, the value of content type is going to be application slash JSON. I can have another, let's say accept, and this is again going to be application slash JSON, right? So now you can see if you have nested data, if you have multiple type of data, so in that case you can use this particular YAML configuration file. Okay, let me do one thing. These are not looks good. I'll take it as a camel case, so it will look better, right? So user get single user. Okay. So now this is my one of the simple, you can see, YAML configuration file where I have stored all my record keys, and that in uh, these are the details that I can utilize in throughout my test cases. Right now, let's say I'll how to use this particular config details config file, and how we can get these details into our test case, right? So what I'll do actually, first let's go to the our code. Here I'll create one package. Let's say config reader. I'll create one package. Let's say config reader. I'll say config only. So instead of config only, I'll say property reader. I'll create one class. I'll say properties reader. And this properties reader, I'm going to read this particular property file. Okay, this is the property file. This properties file I'm going to read inside of this properties reader. Okay, so here what I can do actually, for reading this properties file I can take, or what you can do, you can first of all I need the path of this particular file, right? So this path of the particular file, you can just right click over here, copy path references, and you can get the path from the config repo. So what I'll do, come to here, I'll store the path of the file, and you can see file path is equals, store it into a variable. Now I'll be creating one method. Let's say public void get property data. Okay, so what this method is going to do, this method is going to provide me the data which is I am configured here in this particular properties file, right? So I'll be what I am going to do, I'll just pass the particular properties key name, and it should return me the value, right? That is my target from this particular method. So this method is going to return me string type of data. So that data is nothing but the value of this particular key, right? So what I can do actually, here I can say take in Java to read the property file. We have properties, one of the class file available inside of Java util package. Okay, so we will be going to utilize this particular package. Inside of this properties, I'll say properties. Before we initialize, we have to read the particular file. You have to get the file, right? So what I will say, file input stream, and I'll say file input stream is equals, and say new file input stream. Inside of this I'll take, and you can pass the file path, right? So this is how we are going to read this particular going to get the file object into file input stream. And let's enter this exception over here. And now here what you can see is equals properties equal to properties new properties. Okay, so I have created an object of this properties file. After that, what you can see, properties dot load, and I have to pass the input. file input stream. Okay. Oh, file input stream. Now this load is going to have an, this is having one checked exception, so you have to handle this checked exception IO. Okay, now this is something what this property is going to do. First we are reading this particular file by using the, first to get the file object, and we have to create an object of this properties class into this particular object reference, and after that we will see properties dot load. So what it will do, it will load this particular file, right? Now what we can do actually, we have to return the data, right? So what we can do, let's do one thing. Whenever this object is created, let me create it as a global. So let me define it global to this particular class file. So I'll be creating this, and on create, let's say public properties reader. Okay, I'm creating a constructor. In this constructor I'm going to assign this particular, uh, you can see I'm going to assign the object value, right? So I'll just remove this, and here I have to handle this particular exceptions, right? I'm sorry, I did something wrong. Okay, so actually I have to take these two lines of code and I have to paste it over here. Okay, so I can, okay, leave it and delete exception. So now we can remove this particular line of code. This line is not needed over here. Now this is also not needed. This line we can take there itself, right? Okay. Now we have to handle this particular exception. I can remove this. Now when any user asks for any particular property data, what I can see, we can return this particular data, right? So we'll be returning in string format, and we'll see, we'll ask user to pass the key, right? So we'll say return, pass me the key. So once user pass me the key, what I can do actually, we can return the value of the key. So we can see properties dot get property. There is a method inside the of this properties class file, that is nothing but a get property. So we'll be utilizing this, and we have to pass the key that is user is passing, right? So this is something that you have to write down here in your utility class. So this is something going to be your utility class. So every time you will be just call this particular method, and you'll be able to fetch the data from this particular property file. Okay, so what we can do, in we'll create a test class. So let's say I'm going to create another test class inside of this. Okay, so that is just for a testing purpose. So let's say test config. Okay, this is one of the class I created. Inside of this I'll be testing that, okay, the data we are going to read from this properties file is properly we are able to fetch or not. Okay, so here what I'll do, first I'll create a, let's say, I'll create a test method. By using the test method, I'll create one, let's say, public void, and I'll say my test config properties. Okay, I'll just test this here. Let's say I'm saying first, what I have to do, I have to create an object of this particular properties reader class, right? So I'll create an object properties reader. Let's say reader is equal to new properties reader. So first I've created an object of this particular class file, and after that, what you have to see, you have to just say reader dot get property data. Okay, now here you have to pass. So I'll be passing URL, so it will going to return me the data. What we can do here, let's print the data what we are getting. System out, and I'll say this. Okay, so here you can see we are getting the data, and we're just going to print it. You can, similar way you can print some other data also. So we can say reader dot get property data, and we can pass, let's say, what are all are the properties we have, let's say browser, right? So we can see, let me print the browser also. So let's run it. You can see we got one exception here. Let's see what is the exception is talking about. Null pointer exception Java, because this property is null. Okay, this property is null, and we are getting this exception at property is a line number 16. Line number 16. Okay, file properties. Okay, we did one mistake over here. We should not have initiate another one. Okay, now this should help, or you can just for configure confirmation you can say this dot property. This one also you can say this dot property, but that is not needed, but you can still use it. Okay, now let's run this code once again. Now you can see we got the value, right? So the data we have used into that properties file that we are getting here into the console, right? So this is how you can utilize the data, which is mostly what happen actually. People keep their properties configurable details there into this particular property file and use it anywhere in your test case, right? So that is how, that is what is the usefulness of this properties file. Okay, I hope this concept is clear to you guys. So what we did actually, we have used an property class, that properties that is comes from your Java util package. Okay, you can see here it is coming from Java util package, and we can directly utilize this class file. And here you have to just pass in file reference object, and this is the way you have to get. You have to get an object of this properties class. After that, you have to say properties dot load. Once you say load, it will, you have to pass the file object reference. And this properties object has its one of the method called get property. Inside of this, you have to pass the key that you want to get the value. So once you key pass the key, it will return, it is going to return you the data from the properties file, and we are able to print the data, right? So yeah, that's about the properties file. Now let's see how to get the data from the YAML file, right? How to use it and how we can utilize the YAML files. Now let's close these properties files and the class files. We'll be talking about how to get the data. First, try to understand the you can see the structure of this particular YAML file. Remember one more thing, guys. The structure of the YAML file is very sensitive, and indentation of the structure of the YAML file is also important. Okay, if you see here, we have two spaces after this. So this is, let's say this one is the root. You can say uh, root here. After that, it has, these are the childs, right? Base URL endpoints and headers. These are the child of API. But this endpoints again has its childs, get user, get single user, and list users, right? So here you can see the indentation we have used, and this indentation is two spaces from the parent. Okay, so this indentation is important, guys. If you somehow break the indentation, so that property data is not going to work properly. So you have to very censure about this indentation, what indentation you are using into your YAML file. That is one of the, you can say, strictness, one of the disadvantage of YAML file. But yeah, if you have very not very large number of data, then this is one of the very good use. Okay, now let's see how we can use this, right? So for reading the YAML file, we need to have one you can say third party library, and in that library you have to configure into your project. Let's go and get that third party library. I am there into Maven repository. I am searching, I'll have to search for YAML, YAML. Okay, I'm searching for it. You can see there are, we have multiple options are there. First you can see JSON data format YAML, we have Snake YAML, Apache Groovy, right? So these are the YAMLs, these are the libraries that is already open library have available there in the internet. So you can utilize any of the YAML reader, any of the YAML handler, right? So for now in this project, I am going to use this particular snake YAML because it is very easy. It is very easy to use snake YAML. So let's take the latest version. I'll copy this particular dependency and I'm going to add it into my pom.xml. So here I can add data bind. Okay, so let me add this maven. Okay, so this is Snake YAML I am going to use into this particular for reading the YAML files. This is configured into pom.xml file. So what I'll do, I'll create a reader class for this particular YAML file. Similar to for properties, I have created a reader class here. You can see properties reader. So I'm going to create another reader which is going to read my property YAML file, right? So what I'll say, let's say YAML reader, right? So I have created an YAML reader class file over here. So in this YAML class reader class file, I have to read my YAML, right? Sorry, there is one more thing before you are going to read that YAML file. What you have to do actually, you have to create this is the structure. Try to understand. API is the root structure. It is you can see there are three child of the API. One is your uh, base your this is first child. Second is your endpoint child, and third is your header child. Right? There are three childs of API. And again, inside of this particular endpoints, we have two child that is get single user and list users. For these headers also, we have two childs, right? So there the structure is this is my API. It has three endpoints, three childs, let's say base URL, endpoints, and headers. This base URI, sorry, endpoints again having two childs. It is get single user and list of user, and these headers also having two childs, content type and accept, right? So this is a very high level structure of this particular YAMLs of the particular YAML file, right? So what is the process of getting into this getting the data into a Java class? First, you have to create an POJO class for this. Okay, that is important, guys. We have to create an POJO class for this. How we are going to create? We'll be creating a class for this particular API. Okay, we'll be first we have to create an API, and in that POJO class we will be having these particular variables. This is one of the variable, and this is a variable which is again having some data. So that is not a that is actually object reference. So this is going to be an object. This is again going to be an object. So there are two types. This is just simply handling a string type of data. So we can take a variable of string type base URL. For endpoints, it is going to be an object to me, right? And that is again going to have okay, again going to have your you can say key and verifiers, right? So this is we have to create a class for this also. Again, headers is going to have their variables, right? These are the variables. So variables is held by a class, right? So again, we have to create a class for this particular header. So this is a base class. API is going to my base class. Instead of this, I will be having this variable, and these are the subclass that is going to be inside of the API. Now again, endpoints is a class. We'll be defining a class, and that class is going to have my this particular variables. Hope this concept is clear to you guys. Now let's go and uh, clear our classes. Okay. So what we'll do? Okay. Now let's come to I'll create an POJO class for my config. So I'll give a name as config. Let's say I'm providing a name config. This is something a POJO class that I'm going to create for this particular YAML structure. Okay. For this my YAML structure, I'm going to create a class. First of all, I'm creating class for this API, right? So I'll take particular for this API, I'll get a class POJO config, and this config this config class. what I'll do, I have to create an this API first. This is the variable, right? And this is going to have multiple. This is a root, and this is going to have multiple variables, and this is again a class. So I will be creating a class with this API. And what we have to do actually, we have to create here. Let's see, I'm saying private void, sorry, private API and API. So I'll be creating one class with the name as API. For this, I have created, let's say, I'm going to have a getter and setter. I already um, uh, shown you how to create a getter and setter. So I just created getter and setter of this particular API class, right? So now you can see we have created an getter and setter for this particular API class. So get API and set API, right? Uh, config input class. No, this shouldn't provide from the guardian. Okay, so private, you can say static and okay. So here it is. Right now we do not have any definition for this API. So we have to create a class for API which is going to again hold this particular endpoint base URL and headers, right? So let's create a class. I'll create a class. Let's say instead of this, I can have this is, let's say, this config is my one of the class. Instead of this, I'm going to have child classes, or you can say uh, it's inside classes or inner class, you can say. So I'll create an inner class. So I'll say public and inner class with static keyword. I'll say static and after that class, and I'll say API class. Okay, so this API class now is I have created this particular inner class inside of this config. Okay, this API class now is what all are the properties is going to have inside of this API. There are three properties: base URL, endpoint, and headers, right? So let's do it. So I'm copying this particular variable name. I'll say private and then say string and then say particular this variable name. Similar way, we have another particular this endpoint. So I'll go to here. I'll add another one, public endpoints, endpoints endpoints. Okay, so I'll be creating another class for this particular endpoint later on. Okay, and then we need to have another class for headers. So I'll be creating, let's say, private headers and headers, right? So for now we're getting error here for headers, endpoint and headers. So what we can do, we can get inner class. You can, so I'll create another inner class. So let's say public, and then you can see endpoints. So the NPOINTS. Okay, public class endpoint, public and static. We'll be taking static and class endpoints. Okay. So we are creating another endpoint class, and I'll copy paste. So we have created two inner class, and this is going to my header class. So here you can see we have created the structure. Inside of this API we have three variables: base URL, and these are my object reference, endpoints, and headers. Because what is the reason behind of this object? These are object reference because um, these are having you can say nested child also, right? So we need to create a variable for this also inside of this particular endpoint class. Before we go inside the implementation of this endpoint class, what you can do, we can create the header and getter and setter for this particular references. So we can see create, cancel it. What happened? No, I don't need this particular, this one I don't need. So what I can do, I can just right click over here and say generate and say getter and setter, and I'll get create a getter and setter for all of these. Okay, so I am done with this getter and setter creation. Now let's come into this particular inside this endpoint class and header class. So in this endpoint class again I am having two parameters, right? Get single user and list user. So I have to create again private string. This is going to be string type of data, and I'll say this is my variable. Another one I'll create private string, and the variable name is nothing but list users, right? Similar way for headers also we'll be creating variables content type and accept. So we'll say private string and content type, right? Similar way private string and accept, right. Now here we have added all these all these variables which is there inside of the endpoint. Now the next job is to we have to create the getter and setter. So let's generate getter and setter. I'll choose those two variables and create it. Done with this creation. Again I'll come to inside of this header class and I'll create the getter and setter. I'm selecting this. Okay, now this is all done, guys. We are done with the creating the header and setter. We can see we are done with the POJO structure of this particular YAML file. Right, this is the YAML file we have created in POJO for this. Now our job is to test this particular POJO that we have created. Right, how to test this? Let's go and test this. I'll say instead of YAML reader, I can say test. I'll just rename it, so I'll use say the emulator instead of emulator. I'll say emul test. Okay, we'll just verify that okay we are able to fetch the data from it or not. Okay, so I'll be taking one test method over here. So let's say public void and I'll say fetch data. Okay, this is one of the test I have created. So inside of this, first of all, I need this particular path of this particular YAML file, right? So I'll right click over here and what you can see, just copy that path. You can see config here and let's store it into a variable. Let's say file path is equals this, right? So we have added this, and for using this YAML into your we have to create an YAML class. We have to use the YAML class. Okay, there is YAML class from the snag YAML. Also one YAML class is coming from testng YAML, but for now we are going to use this snag YAML from this class file. Okay, package. So I'll be taking an instance of YAML class and I'll say new YAML. Okay, so this is how you are going to create an object of this YAML file. Now let's take an file input stream. So I'll be taking input stream and input stream is equal to new stream, new input stream, right? So inside of this we can pass file object. So let's say file, save file path. Okay. So we have created the input stream that is completed. Now what we can do, we can create and we can load this particular YAML data. This is the YAML object and we have this YAML. This is the YAML file. This YAML file data will be loading into a particular variable from this reference by using YAML reference. Let's say YAML reference dot, you can say load. We are having there a lot of methods: load all and load as, right? So what we are doing over here, we are going to have this particular data as into a stream, right? So we'll be using input stream, and this inside of this input stream I'm just going to pass this input stream. This is the stream that I want to use here. And what we are going to use, we are going to use this POJO class, right? This POJO class, we are we are going to use it inside of this particular as a reference. So we'll see the name of the POJO class is config, right? So we'll be using code POJO config dot class. Okay, so this is how we are going to we are going to load the config data, and we have load as. So this is something we need to store into a particular variable so that we can go and use it for a future reference, right? And this is something going to return you data in a particular class object format, and that object is nothing but my class, this config class format, right? So we can say is equals config. So okay, so from this particular class object type, we are storing this the data we are getting as a stream from this YAML reference. Okay, so that is going to be stored into your config reference. Now it is now you are it is ready to use the data that is you have there in the YAML file. So let's do one thing. We can go ahead and we can um, let's say I'm going to print. I'll say config dot, you can see we're getting get API option is there. So we'll say get API, if you say get base URL, right? So it is going to return me the data. Or let's say I'm going to get the headers value, right? So we can say system dot, and I'll say config dot get API and dot get headers I have, right? So I'll say get headers. Instead of the get header, I have the accept, right? So get accept. So it is going to return me the value of this get accept parameter, right? So now let's run this particular test class. Now you here you can see we are able to fetch the data from the YAML file, right? This is our YAML file, and yeah, these are YAML file. The base URL we set there is this one, and this accept value also we have set this, right? Those we are able to get into our test class. So this is how you can use this YAML configuration file. This is useful when you have you can say nested data, and you want to manage your data in very proper management maintainable way. So that in that case YAML file is very helpful, very and it is a very lightweight file also. So this is something how what is the advantages of YAML file. Config file is basically very important, useful when you have very small number of data, or you have very flat structure of data. There is no, you can say, nested data, right? So in that case config is very helpful because it is more lightweight, but it is a YAML is more, you can say, human readable, and you can say maintainable, right? So this is one of the reason why people use YAML also over properties file or some other file, right? Now here you can see we have created, and just what you need to do, we have to create an POJO class for your particular YAML file. Once you are done with the POJO class, now the implementation is very easy for you. Now here one trick, guys, if you want to, if you see that we have created this POJO class manually, this is a very tough job, right? Basically when your POJO, when your this particular YAML file is having more number of fields over here into this particular file, right? So there is one, you can see this, you do not have to do this by yourself. What you can do, actually you can just copy this particular YAML content, right? File content. You can go ahead to internet and you can search for generator. There are so a lot of generators also. So let's say I'm going to search into Google, and I'll say YAML data to POJO converter Java. Okay, so you can see we are getting a lot of options there. From any of the website you can go ahead and you just paste your YAML data, it will convert your YAML into, so let's say, JSON format converter. I'm going to here you can see it is going to ask, let's say I'm pasting my YAML data over here. Okay, So you can see I've just pasted my YAML data and it has converted my POJO class it is created. So you can just directly copy this POJO class and you can use it into your class file. Or you can see you can take a help of ChatGPT also guys. So let me go to ChatGPT and show you this one. What you can do, you can just paste your YAML file content, okay, and you can see let's say I'm giving a prompt now. uh, i want to I want to get POJO for the for this you can see YAML and class name with config, okay. So this is a simple you can see command I have given just. So you can see it is creating a class file whatever we have created manually, right? It is going to create for you. Here you can see it is going to create an POJO class for you. It is already created. So this is how you can utilize the use of you can say ChatGPT, or you can create manually, or you can use some other tools also available there in the internet, and it is showing you how to use also. So any of the approach you can follow, guys. But for creating the POJO class, you can take a help of internet. So you can see also they have created class for you can see. Uh, this is class for your endpoints. So this is a public static endpoint and they have created two parameters, getter and setters. All these things we have done there in right. So these are the things that it is given to you. For headers also you can see they have created in class, and instead of the headers for header also they follow the different approach. They are given the map approach, okay, that is also fine. And based okay, so this is how you now got the idea of how to use this particular YAML file, how to use the oh sorry, how to use YAML file, how to use config file, right? So this I hope this is under you can under, you are getting this for hope you have understood this. If you have not understood then let me know.